Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Highland Park Update Schools Edition. Once again, we are honored to have Dr. Scott Taylor as our featured guest. Dr. Taylor, thank you for joining us again. We've had, so we're closing out on your first academic year with the district, and just to follow up on our last meeting, you continued a lot of the long-term, short and long-term goals that you discussed. In this time, though, specifically, I wanted to talk about some recent achievements and some things looking forward. We went through another budget cycle with the district. The board introduced, vetted, and you held several events outlining what the budget was going to be like for the upcoming year. Tell me a little bit about what we can expect this year.
Sure. So we applied a different standard to developing a school year budget this year than we have in the past. It was very inclusive. It started with one-to-one conversations with all of my leadership team members, principals, supervisors. Those were 2 to 3 hour conversations with each of those individuals to have them rationalize their requests for certain expenditures line by line. We involved the board very intimately from the get-go, which I understand didn't happen previously. I engaged 3 members of the Board Finance and Facilities Committee in the vetting process as well. I brought the leadership team out at night after I had met with them and had them meet with my Finance and Facilities Committee, 3 members of the board, headed by Darcy Simarusti, our board president. And then we went to the community and we got their input. Started by chatting with seniors one day, and that night met with local conservative and Orthodox Jewish congregations at Congregation Ohav Emeth on Raritan Ave. And then the next night we met with the PTO organizations from all the schools. And that was a general open meeting for the entire community. All of those forums were well attended. They were very productive. We took some of the input we received, and between the preliminary budget and the final budget, we're able to find ways to decrease expenditures and even find new ways to generate revenue by being creative internally. And so those members of the community who saw the budget presentation this past Monday night, May 2nd, saw that we were able to decrease the burden on the taxpayer significantly between the time that we first rolled out the budget back in February to May 2nd. So I was very pleased with how that played out.
That's terrific. 2 follow-up questions there, but first, I guess, if you could give a few examples of some of the innovative budgeting that we saw that did lighten the burden on the.
Great question. So we pulled the trigger on some plans that had been in motion before I got here. One was to look creatively at our middle and high school schedule to find ways to scale back some of the additional compensation we were providing teachers who had to be paid on top of their regular salary to cover certain sections of classes. We were able to do that without sacrificing enrollment of each class, or our class sizes are practically the same. And when we're not scaling back any of our programs, except for one, which wasn't the byproduct of this creative solution to some of the problems we were having in the schedule. That's the Hebrew program. We did temporarily suspend that program because the Hebrew instructor resigned and our enrollment was exceptionally low going into next year, so we felt that was not a program we could sustain going forward. We also found a new stream of revenue that I talked about quite a bit through the budget presentation process, and that is through tuition that will be assessed to international students. Next year we'll have up to 7 students from China coming to our high school to be part of our community, and they'll be assessed tuition fees that are a little over $20,000 per student.
but what were some of the concerns or just some of the suggestions that you heard?
Sure. So it's a great question. There are folks in the community who have valid suggestions that we be more efficient with some of the services, that we could potentially consolidate with other school districts like busing. Transportation costs, especially for out-of-district special needs students, are high. And so it was entertained by some folks that we think about working with the county, other school districts, or maybe even the local borough government to share the burden in the area of transportation. That's one area. Potentially utilities costs is another area. That's mostly what I heard were concerns. Not so much concerns, but ideas, suggestions. Right. And so those are things that we'll definitely be looking at going forward. In fact, our business administrator is already pursuing the possibility of finding ways to cut down on expenditures in the area of transportation in particular.
Terrific. Well, speaking of looking forward, I guess that's a good segue into our next segment, and that's the strategic planning process. We talked a little bit about before we started about now you've spoken about on this program the steering committee that has been tasked to develop a process moving forward. So maybe I can I'll let you say the name, but I hope maybe you can talk a little bit about what we can expect in the next few weeks on the strategic plan.
So. Before I actually dive into the strategic planning process, I want to mention that part of our budget proposal, and this relates to the strategic planning process, had us looking to bolster the ranks of our leadership team. So whatever strategic plan action items we come up with can be effectively implemented with support around me. I am one person at the central office level, who unfortunately doesn't have the time to tackle all the district's needs. So we've been vetting candidates for 2 supervisory positions that we anticipate will not only promote student achievement, but also take a really good look at what comes out of the strategic plan that I'll talk about in just a minute. One of our supervisors will focus on humanities, that's language, arts, world language, and social studies, and the other will focus on the STEM fields, science, tech, engineering, and mathematics. So because I think that the strategic plan will ultimately result in action steps that have us looking more closely at how we are preparing students to use new technologies, because we want our kids to become proficient writers. These kinds of things I think are going to come out of the strategic plan. I need more leaders to go into classrooms and model lessons and coach our teachers as they look at how they can implement the steps that are going to come out of the strategic planning process for the kids' sake. So that takes me to the strategic plan. We had a steering committee of 11 people, including myself, who represented various sects in the community. We had folks like Bruce Morgan, who is our regional NAACP chapter president, member of borough government. Susie Welkowitz is the council president. Parents, teachers, a couple of principals. Harry Glazer, who represents the conservative and Orthodox Jewish community. So all these people came together over the course of 4 meetings. And at our last meeting, we came up with a fantastic plan that's going to be all-inclusive of stakeholders in the community. Not just when I refer to stakeholders, I'm not just talking about parents or teachers or even students, especially at the upper grades, who might want to be involved in this process. I'm talking about local business owners, even if they don't have kids in our schools, folks who send their kids to private schools, non-public schools. Anybody who has a stake in the well-being of our schools will be invited to be a stakeholder in this process. And we're calling this process Pathway to Excellence, because we feel like we need a path for the next 3 years to guide how we budget, how we evaluate teachers, the kind of professional development we provide those teachers, the goals the board will hold me accountable for attaining. And we need to do it as strategically as we can. So here's what it's going to look like. We're going to start by launching a survey online and on paper I'm going to be distributing mounds of paper versions of this survey to the Highland Park Library, Stop and Shop, Rite Aid. I'm going to walk up and down Raritan Avenue and ask local business folks if I can leave the survey with them for people who would either rather handwrite their responses or don't have access to the internet or computers. That will be launched on May 16th. And with that launch of the survey, we'll also be launching a special website that people could turn to for updates about the process. Website address, which will broadcast on Facebook and through Honeywell and all kinds of media, is going to be www.pathway.hpschools.net. So that'll be the first step in the process.
We'll provide a link to that in the description of this video. It won't be live, though, until Monday, May 16th, correct? Okay.
So if you'd like, I can just take you through the next few steps.
Yes, please.
Briefly, those who participate in the survey, which incidentally is the steering committee's way of understanding what concerns the community has, the stakeholders have. You're concerned about educational equity, you're concerned about the need for us to promote student achievement more effectively. These things will all be listed on the survey as options for people to indicate that we're either meeting expectations in certain areas or not at all meeting expectations in certain areas, like I just mentioned. On the survey will be a question, and incidentally, it's a 5-question survey, 4 questions of which are just simple. We want your contact info, your name, blah, blah, blah. There's only one question that's going to require a lot of thought. So it shouldn't take people more than 5 or 10 minutes to complete. It is an anonymous survey. If you choose to respond to the 4 questions in which we ask, through which we ask for contact information, we will be reaching out to you and inviting you to join me and the steering committee on June 28th and June 29th from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. in the high school cafeteria to take part in what's going to be an extremely satisfying experience. I hope to see between 50 and 100 members of our community at that high school looking at the data that the steering committee is going to present based on the survey results, and then breaking out into smaller focus groups based on areas of interest. So if I have 15 to 20 people who are passionate about promoting educational equity, and that comes up on our survey as an issue we have to address, those 15 to 20 people are going to branch off into a corner of the high school cafeteria, and they're going to spend a day and a half using certain protocols, certain instructions, developing action steps that I will be tasking my leadership team and faculty to be implementing over the next 3 years. And like I said earlier, that's going to guide everything we do. It's going to determine how we budget, how I evaluate my staff and my principals, and what kind of professional development we offer them. It's going to guide us. It's going to be our pathway to excellence.
That's terrific. Just a little bit. Let's back up a little bit about the steering committee. So, what type of support did this committee provide to this to arriving at this?
It's a good question. So, the task of this committee was to, bottom line, put a process together.
Okay.
There are all kinds of protocols out there, things like Future Search, an effective protocol our local government used, I think, a year ago to develop its plan. The organizations like the Department of Education has its own protocol. Other school districts like Freehold Regional High School District, Princeton schools have their own protocols. All kinds of great things out there, but they're built for those communities or those organizations that those protocols served. I wanted this committee that knows Highland Park from the inside out to adapt these best practices to our needs. So on day one, we started talking about what we want this to look like. We had conversations about potentially having various members of that steering committee host teas at our homes to have discussions with the members of the community. We felt that was a little unwieldy, so we shifted to a survey model. So it took us 4 meetings to look at all these best practices and to decide finally on what we felt was the best protocol. And what we've come up with, we're really, really happy with.
That's terrific. It sounds exciting, and we look forward to May 16th to take part in this survey. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about this, between now and May 16th?
All I could say is it's been wonderful working with you and Gary Leslie behind the camera, and I strongly encourage not only the community to come out to the planning process evenings, June 28th and 29th, and of course respond to the survey, but I'm here all summer, and my door is open, and I always love and would love to continue hearing from people from all walks of life who live in Highland Park, who have some investment in our district, to knock on my door, and especially during the summertime when I have a little less to do, just a little less, have a chat around this table and talk about whatever's on that person's mind.
Well, Dr. Taylor, thank you as always. We appreciate it. We look forward to the next time. In the meantime, so here we are on the pathway to excellence, and don't forget to fill out your survey online on May 16th. The email address the website is below, and Dr. Taylor may actually physically hand you a copy of the survey as well. And then again on June 28th and 29th at 6 p.m. at the high school cafeteria. There are community meetings where you can take part in providing feedback and direction in the strategic plan. Thanks again, and thanks to Gary Leslie and Highland Park Television for facilitating the program. My name is Matthew Hirsch, and have a good night.